Hello guys, it's Chill Naga here, and this is the usual weekly podcast. This week we're going to do Overwatch TF2 comparisons, except I had a lot to say about TF2 and Valve, so this is going to be kind of a part one with Overwatch's own thing coming next week. It was basically meant to look at the two games and point out how they're similar and different, what their individual downfalls are. And they're both class-based shooters, except one does it with characters, and one's nearly 10 years older, so it's an interesting look. I think, anyway. You tell me. Now then, Team Fortress 2 came out in 2007 as one-third of the Orange Box pack made by Valve Software. It's a first-person shooter. It's team and class-based, and you know TF2. I don't have to do this. When the first came out, it looked unique. Many characters who defined what class you were. Okay, completely fucked that up. So you had script writing sucks. You had many characters to choose from, and they would each define what class you were given. They each had their unique way of doing things, and if you turn the developer commentary on, you could get a feeling of what the developers thought of the game when they released it. So you could go around touching these little word bubbles, and then stuff would come up. The developers would chime in and say, "Oh, we're really proud of this art style. We're really proud of the class balance, the unique silhouettes for each character, so they're easily recognizable in a firefight." Everyone's got their own job. Everyone's got, in terms of classes, has their own little niche, that kind of thing. And, they worked hard on this for quite a while, and it came out really brilliant, and it was just really sweet hearing this sort of dedication and pride from the developers themselves. It's rare to have someone put out a product they're actually proud of these days. And they weren't even overreaching or exaggerating or anything. They did have a very unique and strong art style at the time. The characters were pretty unique and easy to identify, and the class balance was, at the time, quite legendary too. You had the fast but brittle scout who could try and weave around shots and rockets to get in close and do high damage priority target killing. The none too agile soldier with his splash damage rockets, rocket jump mobility aid, whose goal was to hold choke points and put some pressure on snipers occasionally. The weird but mysterious Pyro, whose entire life revolves around fire and the revealing of enemy spies, and who can cause a few seconds of burning damage if he puffs you with his flame. The Demo Man, whose depth perception isn't really needed because he just has to blow things up around that area. And he's the best at it. He can do high damage out of nowhere. He can lay traps. He even has the mobility option with sticky jumping. The Heavy is your average big dumb muscle. He's got loads of health. He's very slow. He's strongest in terms of close range firepower out of all the classes bar none. He's also very vulnerable without a medic, so his general attitude towards everything is just kill it. His job is general murder. The Engineer, whose specialty was team mobility via teleporters and area denial with his sentries, could also resupply teammates with health and ammo at his dispenser stations. The Medic's job is to run after people and make sure they are dying slower, and he can make a person invulnerable for a few seconds every now and then, which is important for pushing forward and capturing points. The Sniper's there to pick off key targets, such as a medic, from afar. Long-range, high-damage headshot precision, very brittle class, absolutely hates spies and scouts. And finally, the Spy. The Spy is a dapper gent who can both go invisible on a whim and take on other classes' appearance to fool them. Most brittle class of all, he is an expert mark hunter, medics, heavies, snipers, hates pyros above all else. So, every class had its own little thing to do. You go healer if you want to be the cleric, you go heavy if you just want things to die really quickly. It allowed you quite a bit of leeway on how you were playing. Unfortunately, what I've just said is only accurate as to when the game was released. Before updates that gave the classes further abilities, tweaked some stats, or the side grades happened, well, that's how the game released like. There was no Blitzkrieg, there was no Natasha, there was no Dead Ringer. You knew what a class was, what it could do, and it was actually far less random and complicated and confusing than the bloated monster that it has become today. Some classes were learned due to their low skill ceiling, some had no skill ceiling, but Generally, spies were accepted to be mostly harmless by anyone paying the slightest bit of attention, especially with the pyro around. So, people understood what was going on, they learned the classes, and thus the game began growing a bit stale. Valve started releasing character-specific updates, beginning with the medic. He got new achievements, new goodies to unlock from those achievements, new ways to play, voice lines, domination lines. It was a pretty big deal. And slowly, over the years, each class has gotten his update out. And, some of it was good, some of it was really, really bad. The decision to add an air blast for the pyro for a meager fuel cost was really good. It increased his tactical viability versus soldiers and demo men, allowed environmental kills easier, possibly knocking a spy away from a backstab, help ubercharged or invincible opponents be kept at bay. It was a massive tool bag the pyro got, and while he needed a bit more viability, that somewhat limited the soldier and demo man's role versus this unit that was previously fodder to them. And yet this is one of the best received additions to a class to date. The Scouts update gave him the Sandman, a bat that would be weaker on normal melee than the standard one, but could do a stun. That stun got longer on the enemy the longer range you hit them from, so if your ball had a longer travel time, or an impressive arc across half the map, they would, stay stunned for several seconds longer. Now the problem was, this also worked on ubercharged or invincible enemies. So you could knock an invincible unit into stun for up to around half the duration of the invulnerability, during which time they could neither move nor attack. That was pretty bad. Valve's gone and changed that from working on... It doesn't work on Uber charges anymore as far as I know, and instead of a full-on idiotic stupor, characters just act proper stunned, and they can run around very slowly, but they can't fire, so there's less helplessness. It's still pretty terrible, obviously. But the initial version got banned in competitive really quickly. They just up and nerfed it. Even further, now it also takes 15 of the Scouts' normally 125 health, so he's even more of a glass cannon now. Just one lucky crit from any class can finish him off at that point. Almost any class. Rather than continue listing and changes and updates like this, I'll skip ahead to when I think the ball dropped with the updates. When TF2 started going downhill, and that would be 2009, the Spy vs. Sniper update. It introduced new items for each class, and most of those were alright. The issue is that it also, unfortunately, brought with it the item drop system. If not immediately, then later on, it would mean you couldn't get items off achievements anymore. You had to be really, really lucky getting a drop an hour or two. That might be a duplicate, might be for a class you don't use much or at all, or the weapon you wanted. So, rather than award you a drop for 80 kills or something reasonable, it merely tracked the time of your TF2 being launched in Steam and if you were on a server. So idle servers came up. They started existing, where you left your PC on for virtual items. It got so funny that someone wrote idle software that literally would just tell Valve servers that, hey, I'm playing the game to save on electricity costs. You wouldn't actually be running the then fairly intensive game. It was just a little black window that would simulate being connected to a server. So, there was a grievous split in the fanbase as Valve suddenly came out and, after 2 or 3 months of absolutely no communication, suddenly penalized accounts who have used this idling software. There was no request, there was no warning, there was no foreshadowing. People who even once used this software had their items taken away while on vacation, too scared to do it, whatever got an item, a hat. Script fail again. So, there was no request, there was no warning for Valve to do this. You weren't told to stop doing it or else. They just did it. On the other hand, people too, afraid to try this or who were on vacation and missed the actual thing or whatever, they got a hat called a Cheater's Lament. This was Valve punishing the bad kid of the family very visibly and shamelessly by giving the good one a present for doing nothing. The people who have used the idle software weren't actually cheaters. We weren't cheating the system, we were gaming it, was the general response at the time. There's a bit of grey there, but the fact is that Valve could have just had this frickin' lead up and said, guys, really, next week we're going to drop the ball, to stop using it and you'll be fine. No, they didn't. They split the community with this, and they gave people who didn't do a thing an item that would make them look quote-unquote superior to people who did, and then they called the people who did do this cheaters. That is disgusting. For a time, people kicked anyone with a halo, which Cheater's Lament was as a hat item. It was a halo. So, but sometimes they'd let them play on the servers anyway, but they wouldn't heal them and other things. You know, discrimination started to happen. And I can understand why, because really, Valve didn't do a good job with this one. It was their first serious misstep with the community, is they didn't have a warning of any kind. They just humiliated half the player base out of the blue. And this did actually lead to the first big split of the community and the first what is called unjustified slap on the fandom's butt from Daddy Valve. A smaller second one came when the Golden Wrench event rolled around. Randomly, 100 people would be given a special Golden Wrench melee item for the Engineer class that would turn people to gold on death instead of making them ragdoll as per usual. Except it wasn't random in the slightest. Someone figured this out and demonstrated live that he was going to get a wrench and at the specific time, and he did. Now here's the fun part. The idle program creator is heard and seen counting down the Golden Wrench video, please link this in the description, chill, is a person called Drunken Fool. He also owned a Golden Wrench until Valve banned him. VAC banned him. This is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. One, it's incredibly shitty attitude to take in general, but two, the allegations against VAC, or Valve Anti-Cheat, prior to this event have been that it's bulletproof because it's an automated system. I hope I'm enunciating the air quotes really well there. So the developers basically denied that they could influence VAC in any way before, said they wouldn't be able to unban anyone either, that they wouldn't do it. Except, if you can manually VAC ban someone, then I guess that's Valve lying to you once again. Whoops. And the best part is 6 completely other unrelated people also got VAC banned for getting golden wrenches. I will link the article I'm using as a source for this, but it makes a very good point. If someone told you, craft around this time, and you did, and you lost your entire games library, right, several hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of games, without knowing about the leak or why this person, a friend, told you to, how would you feel? Because Drunken Fool's involvement in this was more tangible. You know, he allegedly obtained the leaked drop times list, but what of the other 6 people? What did they do? So this was actually taken from a 2010 article, so I won't go into follow-ups with how Valve treated the ensuing outrage. They made a random system that wasn't random. They somehow leaked a time drop table and were banning innocent players who tried to craft around that time, taking away their games and potentially their entire accounts over this. A bigger mistake was, once the items came in, they soon added sets. While wearing specific items granted you a little boon or benefit, specific items in a set, but only if you wore an accompanying hat. A hat was a part of the set and you needed it. Except, a hat is an item that by nature has a super rare drop rate. You have 9 classes, and each of those classes had multiple hats. I don't know how many that could drop. I think 3 each, 2, 3 each. So this was to incentivize the also new edition of the store, of course. For the low, low price of obviously gambling, also known as $2.49 one piece, you could get a Manco supply crate key. This would open 1 loot crate and yield you 1 item from a list of many you could get. For instance, a very late Series 100 crate has 18 items with drop rates from 7.14% to 4%, and a 19th quote-unquote item that you could get marked as having a 1% drop rate, which read, an exceedingly rare unusual weapon. Now this was the thing you wanted because this was the really nice rare stuff that had severe monetary value, in the hundreds and thousands. Else you'd get a duplicate for a weapon you didn't want or need, for $2.50. Totally not gambling, right? Totally worth everyone's time and money. What a joke. So yeah, crates came in series, and you had quite a bit of choice. You could sell crates you got back for pennies to the market, and I should mention here that you had a weekly drop cap. you could only get, say, 7 drops if you played enough in the week, after which you'd get none until an arbitrary cutoff point. Now, the loot crate that you got counted as a legitimate drop item, but would be completely worthless without the accompanying real-world money-costing key. I myself have had literally over 100 of these crates at one point in my Steam inventory, and I still have some today. It is worth noting that at this point, I went to take a screenshot of my inventory with the boxes left after I sold a huge amount, and I found a strong box. A strong box is like a loot crate, but it requires a different key, naturally, and its contents are completely unknown. Or so it claims when you click it. I'd completely forgotten about this. And I'm sure there's a wiki that says, oh, you can get these items, but, for people who don't look that up, this is gambling. There's nothing else about this. This is gambling. Valve eventually gave up and allowed an item onto their store called the Something Special for Someone Special. This is a virtual wedding ring for $100. It might have actually been more, because I seem to remember it being more, but I wikied the price for accuracy when I wrote the script and it said 100. So let's just assume that it never cost less than 100. Or let's assume that it might have cost more. So, isn't that awfully nice of them? They no longer had to lift a finger, and people would pay them a huge chunk of change to get this, novel item. This was indeed the flavor of the day. Items like this soon began to be purchasable, soon began to flood the store and be purchasable. That pesky weapon you couldn't get via drops, you could now buy. Other rare special items, To be fair, they did introduce junk to mitigate the drop factor. Items you didn't want, you could craft down into junk, and if you had more than enough, you could craft into something else with them, but that entire process was random. So you could have the materials to make a hat, but you could get a completely different or useless or a duplicate hat, and acquiring the junk for this, if you were purely using your drop rates, took several months. You couldn't do this more than twice a year, I think. So then eventually you were allowed to merge certain weapons or weapon types to produce a different weapon of that same type. So if you smelted 3 main weapons, like the soldier's rocket launcher as a main weapon, then you would get a new main weapon for any of the 9 classes. And they all had, at this point, they each had like 10 each. It's ridiculous. So good luck getting what you wanted. Sometime in 2011, TF2 then became free to play. While this was fun for inviting in new blood and more players, it led to another fracturing of the player base as the clueless new idiots flooded the game, seemingly ruining it. This is not me speaking, this is the public opinion. Lots of dumb players who would ruin games, easy fodder to farm for the legit pro players. There was lots of voices going around. There were lots of voices going around. But since its release, Valve has been quite diligent with releasing patches for TF2 and keeping it alive, besides this little fiasco. But after drops and items and the store became a thing, they dialed this back super hard. Their own patches would consist of new items you could buy that were quote-unquote officially added to the game from submissions to Valve by people outside of their company. That's quite bad. A lot of content was just awful. Cosmetics, side grades that completely broke class balance, pointless, expensive items that made game performance worse. Okay, remember the heavy? Big dumb guy. His opponent's the sniper from afar and the spy from the back. Because of his high health, these 2 classes can take him out in 1 or 2 shots. The spy in 1 guaranteed. That's their job. Is this guy's a problem, we take it out, right? The spy's a tactical person, the heavy just goes into the fight. Now, okay, so spy used to kill him, sniper used to kill him. Fine. Except, while the spy was supposed to be one of his 2 hard counters, this changed. He got a new item called the Huolong Heater. It is a minigun that is normally completely unreliable or unremarkable except for one feature. It radiates a ring of fire out from under the user. I'm not sure if this is when it's in use or spun up or being fired or just in general. But it means that a spy just passing nearby to even go to someone else or get in that heavy's range would get ignited and revealed. Don't get me wrong, the spy now has lots of ways of not being found out quite so easily, but it isn't foolproof. You have the icicle that melts if you're puffed, but, a clever pyro will still hear the fiery fizzle of someone burning for that split second, and they'll know that that's a spy. You just don't... He's not on fire, but he's a spy. Kill him. Now, this is a class, the spy, that relies on enemy ignorance to do well, and the slightest amount of awareness completely shuts him down anyway. The spy had to go through lots of narrow one-person tunnels where he could easily be bumped into. Explosive stuff could randomly reveal him when he's cloaked. Being a spy wasn't fun unless the other team was completely stupid. And now that happened. Fuck class balance. Buy this item. We need money, we're Valve. Please. I'll just take a drink for a second. This is getting to me because I forgot all about this and now I'm remembering it. And I've not been a Valve fan for quite some time for things like this. So, now that Valve has clearly stopped caring about silly things like class balance and artistic integrity, it was time to usher in a new, even more pathetic age. Idle and trade servers and false player account servers, it said that there's 30 people playing, you'd go and literally no one was playing. Servers that installed harmful plugins with their message of the day splash screen things, made you download disguised viruses in various files to play. There was a lot of controversy. The game was dying spectacularly, the player numbers have tanked. They gave up, they stopped doing meaningful updates in favor of cosmetic crap people would buy to support the game. It went free to play, they didn't really have the incentive to do anything, and the free to play thing, I'm sure, was to boost the dying player base numbers anyway. But, and this is an interesting point in my eyes, is Valve has known about a competitive presence and interest around TF2 for ages, but has only now, this year, nearly 10 years after release, saw it fit to add a competitive mode. You know the funny thing about that? I wonder what other game recently released competitive... Oh, wait, that's right, Overwatch. Gosh dang it, isn't that an odd coincidence? They have a competitor and they're back to creating arguably more substantial content again. It's kind of nice that they still haven't given up on the game at 10 years, but it's not like they've done much, if we're perfectly honest, in the past 5. I should note that when I said they knew about the competitive presence, that we've had a I don't know what to call it, a mode. It's arena mode. It was terrible. You had a team, you picked your classes, and then you just ran at each other like idiots. And there was some waiting time before the match, and people pretended it was more strategic, but you just killed each other. And if you died in 10 seconds to someone's, I don't know, random snipe or a crit sticky bomb or something, you sit there like an idiot. And you wait several minutes for your teammates to die, or the other team to die, just looking and watching and not enjoying yourself, because somehow this was fun, because it's competitive, and therefore it's better because it's not, I don't know. But they had this mode, right? So they knew that there was a competitive presence, and there have been actual tournaments and whatever for so long. For so long, seriously. At this point, Valve's missteps and brazen treatment of the community is just abysmal. We've gotten to the end of the snake's tail, where all the this isn't an apt comparison, but where all the venom is. Once again, I did all this research for the podcast and scriptwriting to help me remember, and it did help me remember. A game released with pride and joy and love to be visually unique and stunning is now nothing but a brothel for purchases that often don't even have a right to exist. Loot crate gambling, which is what it is, has been in there for years. Class balance has basically been destroyed by all the new items and side grades, and most of the current meta consists of small spikes when an event happens, or trading. Fewer people actually play, and some have even moved on to Overwatch. As someone who started playing TF2 in 2008, and enjoyed it greatly before it started going downhill, this is a tragedy. To me, all I see is a once great developer who's put out barely anything good since, who sat on their laurels with their long-promised Half-Life 3, They treated the community really badly, and perhaps most damningly, they compromised and even took on just a massive dump on their own artistic vision and wishes. They and nobody else have helped ruin Team Fortress 2. It ceased to be fun such a long time ago, and it's only gotten worse. It wasn't when they introduced the Huntsman in the Spy vs. Sniper update in 2009. I think I gave up in 2012 or something, because there was just no more fun to squeeze from the game. It just wasn't fun. People with money bags could buy item sets to have a distinct advantage over other players. People could buy premium slots on private servers to have faster speed, instant respawn, more damage, higher ammo. None of this was regulated. Valve did not give a single flying fuck. Just like how it didn't give a single flying fuck about the CSGO Lotto controversy with the other gambling, which is literally the same thing as what they're doing. 100%. The exception is that there's no one that we know of. There's no one going around that says, oh, Valve crates are totally worth it, bro. I'm not involved. You buy keys for crates. Yeah. But I'm sure there's someone. I wouldn't be surprised. This is depressing, honestly, because TF2 was a really good game. It was a really fun game, and I liked my time with it. There were lots of maps. They recreated stuff like the Left 4 Dead maps, which I'm not a fond of Left 4 Dead, but the maps, it was cool. One of the Duke Nukem maps, one of the hotel ones was there. The community was vibrant and creative, and they helped keep the game alive. And then they helped kill it by putting the poison dagger in its chest, unknowingly. Okay. So some new game modes like Man vs. Machine may have been added, so now you can play, and I'm simplifying a lot here, co-op anti-MOBA. So where there's swarms of dumb AI enemies and you'll have to kill them with your cooperative team, and there's some non-standard gameplay in the form of money that drops so you can buy purchasable upgrades for your character. Yeah. So them going free put the player base up slightly, and that mode's new, Man vs. Machine. But all of this came at such a high price, introducing and fostering microtransaction culture and nonsense, and gambling loot boxes. I will never stop saying it's gambling, because it's fucking gambling. It's disgusting. Releasing little to new content, choosing instead to nick stuff from your same community that it had taken so little interest in once the sales died down. TF2, in the end, is a giant that is simply being bled out and brought down by its own creator, Valve. It's lasted a really, really long time, but the decisions taken by the parent company were increasingly larger red flags, and with the community slowly leaving the game alone for Overwatch or other things, this sad look back through an otherwise initially wonderful game's history was necessary to put down a yardstick, a measure. See how far the mighty beast has fallen. It is truly. For me, I wasn't a super fan, but it is tragic, because there was so much effort in there and so much personality, and the death of personality is one of the most painful things. Star Wars Battlefront, they didn't do much with it. It came out, it looked wonderful, it looks wonderful, like it's got amazing graphics, but then the cheaters came over, microtransaction nonsense, nobody really cares now, it's mostly dead, they're putting out expansions, but people still keep leaving it. But that wasn't anything characteristic. That was Battlefront with a Star Wars skin. Let's not pretend it was any more special in any way, other than, oh, it looks pretty. That does not fill me with sadness. It does not fill me with grief. It's a thing that happens. It's EA. They overreached, as they always do. They failed, as they always do. They pissed on the players, as they've always done. And history's taken its course there. That's perfectly fine. I don't care. Nobody really cares. Okay, so we're at the end now. And I've done a massive rant on Overwatch before, so I'll try to make next week's podcast special in some way, but it might just be a short episode if I can't pull enough new information, because obviously I don't want to retread old ground. Here's to hoping I managed to put some history and light on Overwatch in comparison to TF2. Join us next week when we give a similar breakdown of it. And, stay safe, guys. Happy gameplay, and thank you for listening.